Messieurs les secrétaires d'État, Madame la Directrice Générale,
So, State Secretaries, Director General, it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to this Franco-German Energy Forum, the 8th one of its kind. It's a particular year because this is a double anniversary. We're celebrating the special Franco-German Day, which marks the signing of the Elysee Treaty 20 years ago by General de Gaulle and Konrad Adenauer. And we have guests here from the German Federal Minister for Economic Affairs and Energy. We have the Director General for Energy and Climate, French Ministry of Economics, Finance, Industrial Energy and Digital Sovereignty, Bernhard Koch from the German Federal Foreign Office, and Sven Rösner from the Franco-German Office for the Energy Transitions. Their topics relate to the need to develop our power networks in Germany, France, and Europe. I am Nathalie Croiset. I'm a journalist with a speciality in matters relating to the energy transition, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all today. First of all, I'd like to thank all the participants who are following this forum and have been doing so for many years, but are growing in numbers. Thank you to all of you and to all of our partners for their support and cooperation. As you can see, the forum is happening entirely online this year with simultaneous interpreting in French, German and English. And I'd like to thank all the interpreters, Nathalie Pijoulet, Sebastian Weidmeier, Simon Hess, Alexander Schmidt, Helen Ferguson and Kate Vanovich. Just a word on context, because we're going to go straight on to the welcoming addresses from all our partners. The geopolitical context at the moment requires electricity around the world, and of course we're seeing the growth of our networks. These are all factors that call upon us to strengthen the security of supply. And at the meeting last August between French and German ministers, the importance of bilateral collaboration in the energy sector was underlined. We're going to be talking soon about the program, which is going to be a very full one. But first of all, let's listen to the words of welcome to the organizers of this forum, starting with Frank Wetzel. Thank you for joining us at this point. He is State Secretary at Germany's Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy. Good morning, sir. You have the floor. Thank you. And a wonderful good morning to you, Madame Croiset. Thank you very much. I warmly welcome Madame Mourlon, Mr. Rösner, and of course, everyone who is joining us this morning, whether they're going to speak or listen. As you have said, it's a very special day. At our Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, we're particularly keen to welcome you. This is our 8th forum, and we are celebrating Franco-German Friendship on this day. We are hosting this on the German side together with the German Federal Foreign Office, and we're glad to welcome so many top-caliber speakers. Of course, we're delighted about everybody who is participating in this event. Franco-German collaboration is essential for both countries to function and also for the European Union to function. Close, stable friendship between our nations is more important than ever. In the light of the political shifts that we're seeing in the geopolitical context at the moment, the Franco-German Energy Forum has become an important date in our exchange in recent years. And as you said, Madame Croiset, it's a very special year as well for this format, because we're marking the 20th anniversary of the Franco-German Office for Energy Transition, and I would particularly like to congratulate the organizers of that. There will be some celebrations for this anniversary event, but let me say something about the significance of the Franco-German Office. It was a project that derives from cooperation between France and Germany in energy policy, and it facilitates exchange between French and German players on energy issues. So I would personally like to thank Mr. Rösner and Ms. Pizzotti and their entire team on a very personal basis. At the start of the year, we can look ahead. Last year, when a new government took office in Germany, the relationship between France and Germany was refreshed. The heads of state, Monsieur Macron and Herr Merz, talked about the significance of this collaboration in terms of energy and economic policy. Energy plays a core role because of its broad impact on economic policy and its close links with geopolitical issues. In August, we adopted a Franco-German economic agenda, and now we're working full steam ahead to implement that. On cross-border energy infrastructure for power and increasingly for hydrogen, we intend to collaborate more closely. And we want to simplify and accelerate our permitting procedures in the power market. And, of course, in the framework of EU legislation, we're working together more closely than ever. And on the difficult issues, such as energy targets for 2040, we intend to pursue a closer exchange. We've seen once again that cooperation helps us to achieve our common aim of energy security and to strengthen our single energy market. I'm delighted, therefore, that energy supply and the expansion of the grids are at the center of today's agenda. We're used to high standards when it comes to energy security. We need to make sure by taking measures that we can continue to meet those standards in the future. People expect that of us in France, in Germany, and of course across Europe. Incidents such as those in the Baltic Sea or the recent attack on the energy system here in parts of Berlin show that we need to be more efficient in protecting our critical infrastructure and need to constantly review and enhance our energy efficiency and security. But it's not just about averting threats. We need a sufficiently diversified, reliable energy supply in an energy system which is no doubt going to continue to change. That will call for investments in dispatchable capacities and the development of cross-border energy infrastructure. This will make an important contribution to energy security. It will make us more resilient and it will strengthen our single energy market. And against that backdrop, the fundamental agreement between Germany and the European Commission on our new power station policy is good news. Details need to be thrashed out, but as a precursor for a broader capacity market, we will be putting out tenders for 12 gigawatts of new power stations in Germany this year. And that is an important step for improving the resilience of the power system in Germany and, indeed, in the single market. The transition to carbon-free systems is also on our agenda. So for energy security, we need not just power stations, we also need well-developed cross-border grids. Germany and France are both at the core of the European single market, and that's why it's more necessary than ever to think about energy security in European terms. Core questions are, how can we bundle our potential even more closely? The market is important in terms of affordable costs for people and for industry. And that's why we have agreed, for example, to continue to expand the expansion of this cross-border infrastructure by working together. This is also important for the hydrogen infrastructure, where France and Germany have been working together with Spain and Portugal. The hydrogen southwest corridor should be one of the 8 energy highways in Europe, which will develop through the 20s and 30s. We welcome the Commission's decision to adopt a grid package, which shows that a greater focus is being placed on these things. This package is an important step towards strengthening the single energy market. Thank you to Mr. Jürgensen. to Ms. Jorgensen, indeed. The overall system costs will be increasingly in our focus, and the acceleration and simplification of permitting procedures will require more suggestions than those we've seen to date. We need substantial improvements, and that also applies to environmental law. That will help to speed up and facilitate these permitting processes. France and Germany at the core of the European market have a strong energy mix, and we will tackle these security issues together on a coordinated basis. We have an intensive exchange, and today's event is an important framework for this discussion. I'm looking forward to a stimulating discussion, and I hope that in the next 20 years, things turn out just as well as they have in the last 20. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that initial introduction to the Franco-German Energy Forum. We're now going to hear from the Director General of Economy in the French Ministry of Economics, Finance, Industrial, Energy and Digital Sovereignty. So, Ms. Mourlon, go ahead. And thank you for being with us today. Good morning, and thank you very much to everyone. Thank you to Frank for your introductory words. I'm delighted to be with you this morning for this 8th Franco-German Energy Forum, and also to celebrate 20 years of Franco-German cooperation through the Franco-German Office for the Energy Transition. And this is, of course, a symbolic date, the 22nd of January. It's the anniversary of the signing of the Élysée Treaty and the founding of Franco-German Friendship. So I'd like to pick up on what you have said and recall the importance of Franco-German cooperation, as well as its key role in the energy transition of the European Union and European construction more generally. That's in the light of the climate emergency. We need to speed up the pace of the transition towards a decarbonised energy system. Energy is at the heart of our economies and our lives. We need to move away from our dependence on imported fossil fuels. We need to maintain our energy resilience and independence without jeopardizing our current lifestyles. We need to that end to roll out electrification of our energy uses on a large scale. We're moving into the era of electricity right across Europe. This decarbonisation of our uses, this boost in the resilience of our economies requires large-scale electrification, and we need to do that together. In France now, electricity makes up 25% of our energy consumption. All of the transition scenarios demonstrate that that share is set to grow and likely to be above 50% in the future. So it's a huge challenge that we need to take up together. This electrification and large-scale development of decarbonised energies that will go hand in hand with that calls for thoroughgoing transformation of our electricity systems. The way in which our energy system functions is not just based on electricity for the time being. We need to ensure security of supply and decarbonisation across the board. It's true that transforming the electricity system is absolutely vital. And Frank, as you said, this is a challenge for us at all levels, from consumption to production and generation, and also, of course, the grids, because if the grids are not tip-top, it will not function as well as it could. We thus need to adapt our system to the new fluctuations in production that we see due to an increase in the use of intermittent energies, and also changes in use of electricity that's set to grow dramatically. Despite all our efforts to save energy, that's because of more use of electricity in various different fields, plus the development of new uses such as data centres, artificial intelligence. We need to ensure availability, but also bear in mind questions of cost and competitiveness. We need to ensure availability, good time-up, resilience and reliability of our networks. France has chosen a well-balanced electrical energy mix for this. We are drawing on our nuclear power facilities. There's a new programme for that. We also have hydroelectric power. We're delighted to have made headway on this front with the European Commission to overcome a dispute which has blocked investment in hydroelectric power in France for several years now. There will be legislation as a result of this, but it has to be said that relaunching investment in hydroelectricity is of the essence. And we're also looking, of course, at boosting solar power, wind power, and offshore wind stations. There's a huge opportunity for us to set up an energy system that really does justice to our ambitions on the climate front and our European values such as sustainability and competitiveness and innovation. It's a huge issue in terms of sovereignty and competitiveness for Europe. Moving away from imported fossil fuels and the ensuing dependencies is thus vital, all the more so against the geopolitical backdrop that we see at present at the start of 2026. It's a challenge, certainly, but it's also a huge opportunity and it's enormously urgent. Top priority. Security of supply must be guaranteed in the short term with the energy mix we currently have. And Frank, as you've recalled, there are a whole host of issues at stake here in the short terms for security of supply. Franco-German cooperation is at the heart of our strength, and the unity of the European Union is of the essence here. We need to ensure short-term resilience of our grids to diversify our sources of supply, but above all, we need to invest for the future of our energy grids, in particular our electricity grids. Like you, I'm delighted that the EU's grid package has made some headway on this. I think there is still a lot of work ahead of us. The Franco-German duo has a great deal of work to do to ensure that this grid package is an instrument that serves the consolidation and development of our electricity grids. We believe in particular that it is of the essence that electricity infrastructure planning is grounded in in-depth studies conducted by member states and based on peer review as well as to how our energy mix is developing and the transformations that go hand in hand with that. Every nation is responsible for an orderly transition and shared planning as we move forward to growing our networks. France is at the crossroads and at the heart of the Western European network, and we're delighted to build this network together. And this is going to be focused on this year when France will hold the presidency of the G7. These issues are of the essence. The role of artificial intelligence and network stability are going to be absolutely at the heart of our work. As you recalled, last year saw a real relaunch of our bilateral relations driven forward by our heads of state. I'm looking forward to continue our bilateral work this year. The Franco-German duo is vital at the heart of Europe, and we are responsible for that excellent cooperation, tapping into our complementary strengths and drawing lessons from recent crises. The Franco-German partnership embodies a Europe that's able to overcome crises and to lead the way in the global energy transition, building an energy future that is resilient, decarbonised and sustainable, based on innovation. And we have to cooperate on that front. To cooperate, we need to work together, we need to discuss, we need to analyse, we need to look at our analyses in greater depth. We need to share those results one with another and spend some time together so that we can build this shared vision of the future. So I'm looking forward very much to our discussions today during the 8th edition of the Franco-German Energy Forum. I'd like to thank the Franco-German Office for the Energy Transition, and I'd like to thank all of you for participating in this and in past editions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Director General. We've really heard a lot about what's at stake and this increasing cooperation between France and Germany that really illustrates the challenges. And you've spoken about the European grid. We will also hear from the Director General at the European Commission in charge of the grid, who will speak about what's at stake. But now we will continue with the organizers of this forum. I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Bernhard Koch, the State Secretary at the Federal Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and you have the floor for your introductory remarks now, sir. Yes, thank you very much. Madam Director General, Mr. Rösner, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 8th Franco-German Forum on Energy Transition. I'm very pleased to welcome you here today, also on behalf of our Minister, Dr. Johann Wadefull, on this day where we celebrate Franco-German Friendship, also here at the Federal Ministry for Foreign Affairs. Short time, this annual meeting has become an indispensable part of our Franco-German cooperation. And therefore, I'd like to extend a very special thanks to the Franco-German Office for the Energy Transition for organizing this forum and their commitment throughout the past 20 years, where they have fostered this cooperation between our two countries within the framework of energy transition. And the resilience of future-proof energy supply are among the biggest challenges facing Europe today, and the Franco-German partnership plays a central role in this context. And this year's forum provides a valuable opportunity to learn from each other and to further implement the learnings and insights from Toulon. We want to develop our energy markets by 2050, and that is why we are striving to further harmonize our energy policies, and in doing so, also in the interest of Europe. Our joint aim is clear. Europe is set to become climate neutral by 2050, and thus strengthening resilience and competitiveness. We must secure the opportunities of the electrification and also tap into the potential of the clean tech boom for the European economy, which are also created by the progress in other countries, such as in the global south. And therefore, both our countries need to work closer together, particularly in areas such as network development, energy research, and storage technologies. At the same time, we are facing similar challenges, energy issues, in particular costs that affect not only the economy, but directly affect the daily lives of citizens. That makes it one of the most important issues for the future of our societies, and is precisely for this reason that it is of utmost importance that we continue and deepen this exchange. Today's forum, we have three major aspects. The European integration as a key for energy security. A deepening of the European Union is important in order to secure the future. That means enhancement and development of electricity grids, harmonization of energy regulations, and a greater cooperation in terms of diversification of energy procurement. The Repower EU roadmap is an important step in this direction that we need to take forward together. Cessation of all fossil and nuclear energy imports from Russia is urgently needed in order to stave off the flow of fresh money to the Russian war chest. We need to focus on developing and implementing green technologies, in particular in the area of green hydrogen, the production of green hydrogen. Second, grid expansion as a basis for the energy transition. A key aspect for a successful energy transition is the expansion of our grid infrastructure. Only through the modernization and expansion of grids can we efficiently integrate and distribute the increasing production of renewable energies. In concrete terms, this means removing bureaucratic hurdles, red tape, in order to accelerate investment and facilitate the implementation of projects. The EU network package, or grid package, will make an important contribution to this. Thirdly, interconnectors are the backbone of Europe's energy supply. International interconnectors are not only enable cross-border electricity trade, but they also increase the security of supply and help reduce energy costs. It is therefore crucial to strengthen existing links and create new ones in order to make the European energy supply more stable and resilient. Germany and France have a responsibility to lead by example. Only through a strong, common European energy policy can we reduce our dependencies, fight climate change effectively, and ensure our competitiveness. So let us seize this opportunity, this forum, to deepen our dialogue, to intensify our cooperation, and set the course for a secure and clean energy future in Europe. Thank you very much for your attention. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Back on the screen here. Thank you very much, State Secretary, for this very productive contribution. And this brings us to the end of the introductory remarks. And I'd like to also welcome Mr. Sven Rosner, German representative of the Franco-German Office.
Thank you, State Secretary Wetzel, State Secretary Kutsch, Director General, dear Sophie, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, dear friends. Good morning and a warm welcome on behalf of the Franco-German Office to this 8th Franco-German Energy Forum. We're really honoured to be able to co-host this meeting today, together with the German Federal Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy, the French Ministry of Economics, Finance, Industry, Energy and Digital Sovereignty, and the German Federal Foreign Office. The 22nd of January is a very special day for us because this is the day on which we celebrate Franco-German friendship. We can feel new momentum in this very particular and special relationship since the last round of the Franco-German Council of Ministers, which was held in Toulon at the end of August. In that council, the governments of France and Germany agreed upon a pragmatic and ambitious work programme also in the realm of energy. And in this context, we focused on convergences in order to identify strategic priorities. That relates to questions such as the compatibility of energy mixes and energy systems, electricity prices, markets and tenders, and hydrogen. So with this work programme, our countries have modernised their roadmap and turned their gaze to the future, because the future is full of unlimited opportunities if we're ready to seize those opportunities. In fact, it can be said that today Europe does have the most reliable and most efficient energy system in the world, and that is certainly a competitive advantage for our economies. Those of us who've travelled elsewhere in the OECD, for example, to the US, are well aware that almost permanent grid uptime is something that can't be taken for granted everywhere. So our security of supply in terms of electricity supply is a real hallmark of our system in the European Union, but it does take a lot of work each and every day. As we move from a more controllable approach to greater volatility, our systems need to take that into account and be prepared as well for growing electrification of uses. Huge expenditure will be required to renew and develop our grids, roughly 80 billion euro per annum for the European Union over 15 years. In the long term, however, these investments are going to allow Europe to keep its competitive edge when it comes to security of supply, but they're also going to make it possible to hugely cut expenditure for imports of fossil fuels. That, of course, will have a positive impact on our external trade balance, but it will also have a positive impact on our carbon footprint. Resolving the trilemma of energy policy, seeking to strike a balance and ensure that we have affordable, stable and clean energy, will of course involve the overall system and thus, of course, security of supply. We're really looking forward to fascinating presentations on these topics throughout the day. We've got a whole host of top experts from the energy world, and we'll be winding up today with Lydie Lescarmontier, who's a glaciologist. Today we're looking to the future, yet at the same time we are well aware that we will only be able to move properly into the future if we grasp the past. And in this context, glaciers are the most complete and the oldest history books on our planet. They are now vanishing because of climate change. In the Alps, their remaining lifetime can be numbered in decades. They, in a sense, can be viewed as the hourglass of climate change. As they vanish, they will give rise to phenomena that will have a knock-on effect on our lives in all levels. When I was younger, I met a man who introduced me to this amazing world. I guess you will be able to guess who it is if I say, as a clue, the two worlds, Greenland and the Nobel Peace Prize. And I hope you've guessed right. I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Fridtjof Nansen, who was probably the very first to excite people's imaginations with his narratives on snow, ice, and the poles. But over and above that, he was a man who refused to focus just on a small topic-related realm. The Northwest Passage interested him just as the rights of peoples did, and through his works, he forged a vision of the world and of human beings. One of his convictions was the following: the history of humanity is a history of constantly moving from darkness towards light. And for that reason, it's absurd to discuss whether science is useful or not. Humanity wants to know and seeks knowledge. If it stops doing that, it could no longer be called humanity. So there's an entire manifesto in those words. And those words reassure me, because when in the Franco-German office we talk about our work and how useful it is, it's important against the backdrop of so many people rushing towards artificial intelligence when it comes to intellectual activities. If humanity wants to continue its journey towards light, it must remain capable to take decisions, thus to obtain information and discuss, to be able to reach agreements together. That is the underpinning that led to the Franco-German Office being set up 20 years ago, to focus on reflections grounded in facts and shared learning. 20 years are pretty much an eternity in the world of energy, but as topics have moved forward, as certain truths have become accepted, alliances are formed and fragment again. That all makes energy a fascinating topic and gives rise to these amazing meetings that we've had throughout this journey, which makes the whole process so inspiring. In the 2025 edition of the forum, André Poschmann talked to us just as he'd always been, full of energy, full of convictions, highly strategic, and always with that mischievous smile of his. André left us just before Christmas. Our thoughts are with his family and with his close colleagues, and we would like to pay tribute to him today. Thank you to everyone who's made this conference possible. Thank you to the ministries for their support, to the speakers, to you, Natalie, for moderating these sessions. Thank you to the interpreters, to the technicians, to my colleagues, and of course, thank you to you as well, dear audience. We're delighted that you're with us today for this Franco-German Energy Forum. Have a good conference. Thank you, Sven Rosner, for this introduction. Now, you talked about what we'll have as the highlight at the end of this forum. We'll have a glaciologist, and we'll also have Sönke Sala, who'll be talking to us about carbon balances and soil and such like. But let's first of all address the issue on the agenda today. I'd like to thank everybody who's introduced today's event. Thank you very much to all of you for the introduction. This morning we're going to be focusing on the European framework and future scenarios for electricity demand and network development. In the afternoon, we'll focus more on security, reliability, and indeed grid expansion. The scale and funding of the future energy system, that's a key topic, of course. A few practical points for everybody who's going to speak today. Do please speak at a reasonable pace and try not to use too many acronyms to make life easier for the interpreters. The presentations and the videos of the forum will be published on the 5th of February on the Franco-German Office's website, and everyone will be able to download them. You can put your questions in the chat, and I shall pass those on to our speakers subsequently. So let's start now with the first session.
Merci beaucoup. Merci, Madame.
Thank you. Dite Jul Jorgensen. I just have to make a small introduction, give a small introduction, because we will be speaking about the European framework. We have already touched upon it, or several speakers have already touched upon it, and also the future scenario in terms of energy demand. We will come back to you when it comes to the European Grid Package and the aims for 2050. Thank you, Dieter Juhl Jørgensen, General Director for Energy Affairs at the European Commission. I give you the floor for 20 minutes. If you have any slides, please do not hesitate to say or indicate when you wish the slide to change. And thank you very much, Madam General Director. Thank you, Nathalie. Thank you for this invitation. Good morning, dear State Secretary Wetzel, Mr. Koch, dear Sophie. Thank you very much for this invitation to speak at this forum this morning. It's an honor and it's a great opportunity to speak about the grid, the security of supply for power, etc.
I am going to switch into English. To be fair, but I very much appreciate this opportunity. Congratulations to all of you on this 20th anniversary. I would suggest that we go to the first slide. And I will start with addressing a bit of the geopolitical context. It's known to all, but just the energy aspects of the geopolitical context before I come to how we link that into our work on electrification and the grid package in particular, and then some more about security of supply across the European Union. What we have seen over these last years is, of course, a very dramatic change in the geopolitical situation, primarily with the Russian invasion into Ukraine in February 2022, the energy crisis that followed in 22, 23, 24. We're still at the tail end. We have seen attacks on Nord Stream and the Baltic Sea. We have seen a number of attacks on submarine cables in the Baltic Sea. And so we see that our critical infrastructure across the European Union is increasingly targeted by hostile attacks. We saw in Berlin very, very recently what appears to have been an attack that caused a blackout affecting 45,000 customers and districts in southwestern Berlin. So this is a reality. It is part of our energy security and our economies. We, across the European Union and together, have acted swiftly. We have been firm in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. In the energy field, we launched, together with the 27 heads of state and government that met in Versailles already in early March 2022, to phase out the Russian fossil fuel imports. We saw an agreement by Council and Parliament in December on the gas aspects of that. So we will now see a permanent ban on such imports, really a historic decision if you look at the role that Russian gas has played across the European Union for our energy system. But of course, we have also seen that this weaponization of energy and this weaponization of fossil fuel supplies in particular, we can see from that the energy transition we are engaging in towards climate neutrality in 2050 is, of course, about fighting climate change, but it is as much about our security and the affordability of energy for European consumers. And security and affordability go together very, very closely. If I can turn to slide, I can't see the slides on the screen myself. I hope they're there. Could you confirm that, Natalie? Yes. Very good. Thank you. I have them now in front of me as well. So the first slide really was to show this, but also to show the very high dependence on Chinese critical raw materials, a critical part of our value chains for the energy transition and for our security across the European Union. So while the energy transition is necessary for our security, it also comes with some risks. The reliance on critical minerals, where the global processing is highly concentrated. We're close to a monopoly in a number of products that are a necessary part of our value chains. We have other dependencies than China and clean tech. We have some dependencies, for example, in enriched uranium, another significant sector for our economy, for our energy, and one that we are addressing as well. We've seen that the refining sector in the European Union has seen quite a significant decrease over the last few years, and that, of course, brings challenges as well, also for the transition, because it's a sector not just for the fossil energy, but also for clean fuels. So we need to strengthen our resilience. We need to strengthen our autonomy, as has also been identified by the current Cypriot presidency, and as you will have heard from President von der Leyen speaking in Davos earlier this week. The current slide you see is about the energy crisis, and it really exemplifies the link between security and competitiveness and affordability. You see the very dramatic price peaks in the summer of 2022, and the significant impact that security risk, that security challenge has had on prices and affordability. Now, moving to our efforts for electrification, we know that we are more resilient with a more electrified energy system. We know that an electrified energy system is much more energy efficient than other systems, whether it comes to transports, heating and cooling, or industry. And so we know that this transition is helping us towards a cleaner and cheaper system, cleaner and cheaper electricity, and that can contribute to our competitiveness, our security, and decarbonization. So the Clean Industrial Deal that was presented a year ago introduced some performance indicators on electrification, aiming to bring us around 32% by 2030. We are currently at 23% only. So we are lagging behind the most electrified economies. China is already at 30%. It will require significant investments, as Sophie also mentioned in her intervention earlier. So we need to we need to invest in grids, we need to invest in generation, we need to invest in storage and flexibility to make it happen. And that brings me on, of course, to the grids package that you have asked me to say a few words about, the grids package that was introduced towards the end of last year. If I could request that you shift to slide 3, which will provide an overview of what are the needs in the grids sector in terms of investments and what is the current state of play. Now, we know, as you have also said, that the grids are a foundation of secure, independent and prosperous Europe. We want a Europe that has an integrated and interconnected energy market that can deliver lower prices, more security, more resilience and cleaner energy across the European Union. We know that we have a number of challenges in achieving that, and we have set out a pathway with the grids package for how to do. Now, the first point I would make here is the need, the size, the scale of investments needed, 1.2 trillion euro until 2040. This is very high, but we know that the cost of inaction is higher. It's a worthwhile investment for the reason set out. We know that if we do not make these investments, we will see higher redispatching costs, we see curtailment, we see growing connection queues for new generation and new industries, such as data centers, but also manufacturing and energy intensive industry that could electrify, but that need certainty that there will be the generation and the grids to allow them to do that. Another challenge is something we have also sought to address over the last years, and that is the pace. Permitting is a significant bottleneck. It simply takes too long across the European Union. I would note that our new rules to accelerate permitting in the field of renewable energy have been implemented very well by some member states. Germany is a case in point, where you have actually seen very impressive results in terms of accelerating the build out of renewables. We're trying to do something similar in the field of grids, part of the grids package and an important part. We also have seen supply chain challenges, supply chain disruptions, and again, that overall resilience of our system. And we have seen that the costs, the challenges in organizing bigger projects in terms of the distribution of costs and benefits. And then if you look at the third challenge, we see that there is a gap between the projects that are planned and those that are actually needed. And so and I know you will be speaking later, on estimates that 41 gigawatt of cross-border electricity needs could remain unaddressed by 2030 unless we take action. If I could ask a move to the next slide, which is an important part of the action taken and suggested under the grids package, but also under the proposed multi-annual financial framework. We have proposed as part of the grids package a revision of the Connecting Europe facility. In that proposal, we have suggested European highways and a strengthened trans-European networks legislation as well. If I start with the finances, because this really is important, the Connecting Europe facility is an important instrument under the European budget, under the multi-annual financial framework. We currently give just below 6 billion euro for the 7-year period of the budget. Our suggestion under the recent proposal is to increase that fivefold for the 28-34 period, really a testament to the massive investments needs in cross-border energy infrastructure and a recognition that while these will be private investments, some public support is needed to make it happen and to make it happen fast enough. If I could ask you to move to the next slide. On the Connecting Europe facility, this is really just to show the sizes we are working on, the scale. We have adopted a grids package, as I mentioned, for the rollout of more secure and cost-efficient infrastructure. And the next slide will give you an overview of what is in there. So let me just go through that briefly, if you would move to the next slide. First of all, as I have mentioned, this cost-sharing discussion sometimes stands in the way of the development of projects. So we are trying to establish more effective tools, more clarity, so that the cost sharing is clear. That can help us make sure that projects are funded both in a fair way and a more equitable way, but also, of course, avoid the delays that happen when discussions stall. Secondly, we are focusing on improving infrastructure that is already there to make it more efficient and more secure. It can be through non-wire and security improvements. There is a lot of savings to be made simply by improving some digitization to the existing networks. Then we are suggesting also, as a third point, the streamlining and simplifying the permit granting procedures, as I mentioned before. We did it on renewable energy. We are trying to do the same thing essentially for grids to accelerate that. And then the fourth point is a sensitive but very, very important one, and one where we are engaging closely with member states and with, of course, in that context, directly with France and with Germany. We know that the current planning process does not fully reflect the European common interest. We can see that if we can do more common EU-wide planning processes on cross-border, if we can do better coordination, we can help secure more efficient investments, more focus on what is needed to lower the overall costs in Europe and to address the challenges that are there. So again, I know it is sensitive. I know there are concerns that the EU or the Commission would want to take over the planning processes. That's really not where we are, but we do see the need for more coordination, more Europe, to make sure that what we do works to help us achieve the targets we have set ourselves on energy and climate, for more security, more resilient systems, and of course, for more competitiveness and affordable energy. So the scenario we have envisaged in the proposal would be developed through a consultation, very structured, strong consultation, close consultation with member states, with regulators, and of course, Damien, with transmission system operators and other relevant stakeholders. We also see the need for member states, for national governments to have a stronger role than they do today. As part of this consultation and approval, there is a necessary public role in all of this to make sure that the public interest is fully reflected. If I could ask you to move to the next slide just to show what are the energy highways about. The map shows you 8 priorities for the energy backbone. These are not the only priorities, these are not the only important projects, but these are projects that are strategically vital for the European Union. And 4 of these 8, as you will see and as you will know, concern France and Germany, whether it's the Pyrenean crossings 1 and 2, the Bornholm planned energy island, the Southwest Hydrogen Corridor from Portugal to Germany, and then the improving price stability and energy security in Southeastern Europe, of course, relevant also for you. The idea with the highways is to build on strategic projects that have already been identified under the Trans-European Network for Energy Framework, and then to help fast track these to make simplification, less bureaucracy, less administrative hassle, if you will, and more political and financial backing so that we can remove the bottlenecks that currently hold back progress in some of these strategically vital projects. We have established last year a new working method across the European Union. We have established an energy union task force in recognition of the fact that we need to be more practically more closely cooperating, really working together on the ground. And the task force aims to do that. It was set up under the Action Plan for Affordable Energy, really to deliver concrete results through this enhanced coordination and help giving a political impulse to addressing the challenges. This energy union task force can meet at the level of EU27. It can also meet at regional level or just a few member states. It can discuss sectoral issues. So the format is a flexible one. There are, of course, other important regional formats. I know Germany, that you are hosting already on Monday, the North Sea Summit in Hamburg. Also vielen Dank dafür. We know that it is an ambitious summit, and we are glad to be able to participate and contribute to that. We also have, of course, under the regional framework, our high-level groups, and both France and Germany participate in several of those, whether it's Southwest Europe, the Baltic Energy Market Interconnection, and the North Sea Energy Cooperation. What we've seen from these regional groups is really encouraging and interesting. They are essentially pioneers pushing ahead with developments where they're at a regional level, and the development, the progress in any one region can really help show the pathway for others. If I could mention the North Sea Energy Corporation as a fairly advanced regional group, and one that can hopefully help give impetus both in the North Sea region, but also in other parts of Europe. So I would wish Germany here, in this case, every success with the summit on Monday. It really is timely. And it's a strong political signal to investors. They need that certainty, they need that predictability. And so we are following that closely, and of course, following up in the North Sea Energy Corporation group. I would like to move on to security, as security is a theme today, and once again, security very closely related to our grids, our infrastructure, but also again to competitiveness and affordability, as the price developments over the last years have shown. So, if I could ask you to move on to the next slide, the last of my slides. We know that security of supply has has a broader dimension. It goes beyond grids. Infrastructure is important, but there are other aspects to it. And we know that we can only have a functioning energy system, a secure energy system, an affordable energy system, if we ensure that we have a good common security of supply framework. We can also see the significant developments in our energy system, the changes that are taking place that will require an update of the existing security of supply framework. Electrification is one example, the climate ambition, the adaptation to climate change, the new challenges we see from extreme weather events. We see the increasingly complex risk environment more broadly requires us to review our security of supply framework and to modernize it. So we've been carrying out a fitness check. We've published that in December, and we're now proposing a revision of the security of supply framework, really building on, of course, first of all, what did we learn over this very dramatic energy crisis that we've been going through? What worked? What didn't work? Also looking at the large-scale electricity system disturbances that we have been living through. The Iberian Peninsula blackout was a particular challenge, and one where we can learn from. And then we see, as I mentioned before, these attacks, whether they're physical attacks, hybrid attacks, or cyber attacks on our infrastructure. We have new challenges, and we have to make sure that we are ready to address them together. So we will be coming forward with a proposal trying to operationalize energy security at European level. We can have clearer procedures, clearer rules, clearer tools, in particular to be able to respond swiftly in crisis situation. We know that we need a whole of system approach across sector considerations, including between gas and electricity, electrons and molecules. We know that we need to be able to adapt to the changes in the energy system, and we know that we need to reduce what are the strategic vulnerabilities, including the diversification of supplies, coming back to Repower EU and the supply dependencies that we have. So coming back to Repower EU, and once again, very significant developments over the last year with respect to Russian gas. We still have some more work ahead. We have been asked to provide a proposal on the imports of oil from Russia. Only 2 member states are still importers because we've got sanctions in place. So we're working closely with them to prepare that permanent phase out from for all of Europe. We are also in close contact with those member states that have nuclear in the territories to look at how do we address the dependence on enriched uranium, how do we make sure that we develop that sector in the European Union so that we don't shift the dependence on one supplier to another supplier. It's about our security, and we have to, of course, get this right. Also in the more sensitive areas. So we will continue the very close cooperation, close dialogue with the member states, with national governments, and I look forward to that continued cooperation. So, vielen Dank nochmal, un très grand merci.
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for this invitation. Thank you, Madam Director General, and thank you for coming back to the grid package. We've heard a lot about it, very, very important. A question from the audience that I'd like to put to you, quite numerous, substantial audience that is forming. Where do you see the necessity to act in order to implement these policies, these energy policies, both at the level of the European Union as well as on the level of the European member states?
I think when it comes to the necessary action at European level, we cannot allow ourselves to look only at one of the challenges. We need to look at the broader challenges, the broader strategic objectives as a whole. The decarbonization, our security, our competitiveness really go together. We know that the transition can help us be more secure, and we know that it can help us have access to cheaper energy. So we cannot strengthen our security without also having our competitiveness in mind. We cannot strengthen our efforts to decarbonize without making sure that we do it in a way that is also strengthening our competitiveness, affordability, and strengthening our security. So that trifecta, bringing these different pieces together, is critical, and that will require investments into grids, but also into generation, and it will require closer cooperation, more energy union, essentially.
Et donc une autre question aussi qui est en lien avec ce que vous venez.
Another question that is linked to what you've just said, because there are challenges that have to be met, vulnerabilities that exist. How can you avoid that we recreate that kind of dependency of a single provider when it comes to critical raw materials that come from China?
Also a very good question, because indeed we have experienced live what a very high dependence on any one supplier means, what it means for our economy, for our security. And it's clear we have to strengthen our capacity and our forecast, our ability to look ahead and make sure that we are resilient through a more diversified supply. Now that is relevant for natural gas, for oil, it's relevant for nuclear fuels, and it's relevant for the entire green technology supply chain. I think it's important to note, however, that different dependencies have different impacts. A very high dependence, as we saw in the area of dependence on Russian pipeline gas, that was more than 40% dependence. And when you speak about molecules and coming from a pipeline, that dependence has a high risk factor. Because at the moment the molecules are cut, that has an immediate impact on your system. And because it came from pipeline, it was gas that was taken out of the global market and therefore impacted not just us, but the entire global gas market. A dependence on nuclear fuels, to take another example, the enrichment of uranium, we have some significant production in Europe. We have an industrial capacity in Europe. That's an important factor. And you have typically longer stock holding, longer supplies available. And so the impact is less immediate compared to molecules. And then again, if you look at the clean technology supply chains, the solar panels, to give one example, that we have installed are already there, already part of our energy system. And so the impact there is different compared to molecules. That's not to say that these other dependencies are not important and that they do not constitute a risk, but they are of a different nature. And we therefore need to make sure that we address them in a way that addresses the risk and that helps us build our supply chains in whatever parts of the energy system. We have already put in place what we call the Net Zero Industry Act that aims to do that. We are also currently looking at preparing an Industrial Accelerator Act. It's not only about energy, but of course that resilience, that industrial capacity, that competitiveness in the industries linked to our energy system are really critical for our economy, critical for our strategic autonomy, critical for our economic security and for our security. And so we're going to be looking at that also in that context, in addition to the specific security of supply in an energy field. It's also an industrial policy question.
Merci beaucoup, en tout cas, Madame.
Thank you very much, Madame Ditte-Juul-Jørgensen, General Director at the European Commission for Energy Affairs. Thank you very much for setting out these challenges for us. And given that you just spoke about the grid, let's look at the operators of the grid, of the power grid in Europe. And I'm very, very pleased to welcome for this session on the development of the grid system and security of supply I'm very, very pleased to welcome Mr. Damien Cortinas. You are the president of the Executive Council of ENSO-E, also a member of RTE.
You worked in research and development at EDF, and then you were at RTE. You have now become the chair of the board of ENSO-E, which is the European network of transmission system operators in the power sector. It's 40 TSO members, represent 36 countries. They're responsible for the certain or safe functioning and coordination of the European system. I'm going to give you 20 minutes to talk about this system. And please tell us if you want a slide to be shown. And afterwards, we will be taking questions from the public. So feel free to put your questions in the chat if you're listening. Thank you, Natalie, and hello to everybody.
Because this is the language on which we work within ENSO-E. So I hope the translation will be okay, but in any case, of course, if there are questions in French, there will be no problem with that. If I do not see the slides, maybe if the first slide could be put into the screen, I would like to have a first introduction of what is ENSO-E, because if you want to the next slide, ENSO-E, as you introduced, we are the Association of European Electricity Transmission System Operators. And it is very important to know that on the fact that today I'm talking to you, even if I've worked at RTE in France, as the chair of the board, so representing the 40 TSOs. The messages I have today are things that we have worked together and of which we all agree. It is important to have in mind, we always present this map because it represents who we are. This is the European transmission system that we manage together in cooperation through our common association that is ENSO-E. And one important also thing to keep in mind that we have today is that this system is interconnected through most EU countries, only Malta is missing today, but also non-EU countries who are part of the European power system and that are also necessary in order to achieve a good functioning of the full system. TSOs are very different from country to country in the form because the European legislation allows for that. But every TSO, it's an entity that in their country have a public service mission that is very clear in the law. And it is in this capacity that we intervene, and we are going to talk today about how do we plan the system together and what are the challenges that we have to build the infrastructure that we need, in particularly in the financing part that we said before. If we go to the next slide, to frame my intervention, I think it is important to have some ideas in mind. First of all, is that in our view, and I think this is something that is important to remember, to remind everyone, the internal energy market is a clear success of European integration. It has allowed to lower the cost and to increase the security of the functioning of the whole of Europe since it has been established. And this is today we are very clear in this regard, even if it needs improving. And I think this is also, there are some drawbacks that need to be tackled, but this is a clear success. And the European power system that today I represent, it's both the infrastructure that supports this market, but also it is a key element of the security of the continent and its countries. And I think our latest member at ENSO-E, that is Ukrenergo, the TSO from Ukraine, shows very well what it means, the power system in the security discussion. So I think it's very welcome that in the title of the presentation, we are able also to discuss of this aspect of this power system. And if we talk about security, if we go to the next slide, Security, we're discussing security of supply, but it is very important. And we have been working on this a lot in the past 2 years for very obvious reasons, on the fact that when we talk about security, the security of the power system has 3 components that are all linked and extremely important, and we need to tackle together. Security of supply, that's the one that everyone understands, because this is the way we have a system that is balanced at every second of every day, to have enough generation, enough supply, and enough grids to convey one to the other. But also the physical security of the infrastructure. The power system is something that is in the open, so it's easily accessible. This physical security is one of the key important things, as well as cybersecurity. I will concentrate today on planning, so it will go more on the first 2 parts, but it's important to have this reminder that security needs to be tackled as a whole, and we need to see at all the 3 aspects if we want to have a truly secure European power system. And in this discussion, this also introduces, if we go to the next slide, one very important fact that I think we all know, but it's always important to remember, is that energy is a shared competency between the European Union and member states. This comes in part from this security dimension, but it's not the only part. This is at treaty level. I think we all know what are the parts that are decided together through the Union and the parts that are decided at the level of member states. What's very important is that this institutional reality has been there for the past 20 years, is probably there at least for a number of time, because again, it's at treaty level. And we believe that what's important is to be able to make the most of this reality by mixing together these decisions that are taken at national level with this European, with the European targets that we all give as a whole. And for this, we believe that TSOs are well placed, NSOE and TSOs are well placed for that. We have the functioning of NSOE, where we always try to bring together these 2 dimensions in order to have the best choices that are going to be made for the whole of Europe, and in particularly in planning. This is particularly important because several aspects of planning are decided at national level, in particular the energy mix, investments and tariffs, and everything linked to national security. And today we are talking about how this planning can convey the grids that the Europe needs. This link between the 2, it's again something that is at the heart of what we do, and it's very important that in any change that we're going to do into the future, we take into consideration this aspect, that there are things that will stay at both levels, and we need to find the best solution for both. And if I go into planning, and this will be my next slide, this shows why, how do we tackle this common planning today in Europe. This is done through what at NSOE we call the 10-year network development plan that we develop all together, all the 40 TSOs of Europe, also with some of our neighbors, again, that are important for us. And we are going to do this comprehensive plan for the future. It is called 10-year, but today we go much further than that. And for instance, here I'm showing 2040 system needs that we saw from our last production. What is very clear also from all the numbers that we can master is that investing in the grid has a very positive return for society. The system needs that we see by 2050 from our side, the numbers are depending on the scenarios that we're going to take, but are for sure higher at 800 billion euros by 2050. This is a bit lower than the figure that Dieter said before, but again, it depends on how we look into that and the feasibility of some of the parts that we put into this. From this, there will be more than 100 gigawatts of cross-border capacity. What all the scenarios and all the analysis show is that this cross-border capacity, every euro that we put into it, will save 2 euros for the European economy, both through a decrease in renewable curtailment, on an increase of the economic welfare, on the use of the best capacity in every part of Europe where it is built. And in the graphic here, you see what are the system needs that we identify from here to 2040 that are very important, as you will see, and that concern, again, I'm going back to this message on the fact they not only concern the EU members, but also the neighbors that are around us. And if I make a zoom on the situation in France and Germany, because today the Franco-German energy transition, we see very clearly that both countries will need to increase significantly the level of interconnection that they have with all the neighbors. Between them, between us, between France and Germany, but also with all the countries that we have around, which is normal because we see both countries are very central to Europe. It's in its way, and so at a crossroads of a number of the links that will be done between the different parts of the continent. And we see also as well of the fact that both two non-EU members, that are Switzerland and the UK, will be particularly important also in the discussion that we will have about planning the networks for the future. For this, if we go to the next slide, I come back to what I said at the beginning. It is very important that we are able to make work this European 10-year network development plan, or TYNDP, as we like to call it. We like acronyms a lot in our field. I'm very sorry about that. With the national development plans that are done by every country. Here you see how we make it work today. On the fact that in the end, the networks and the investments, the decisions will be taken by every country through the NDPs, and the TYNDP is going to interact with them first by taking the national targets and specificities, then to propose to the national NDPs aligned solutions with an iterative process that in the end makes certain that the projects that we plan at the European level will find their way into every country and the way they are going to implement them into their national plans. We need to keep in mind also as well that on the 800 billions that I said before, the 100 gigawatts of interconnection that I mentioned, in cost, this will be roughly 150 billions. So the interconnections is not going to be the bulk of the investments that will need to be done in the future. And this is where the link between the European plan and national planning will be extremely important, that we keep it in a way that is industrial, that is sustainable, and that can work for the future. So Dite in the previous intervention mentioned, if we go to the next slide, on the fact that we are not certain that everything that we need is going to be built by 2030. And this is something I would like to come, if we go to the next slide now, on the analysis we have done through the TSOs. We share this part on the fact that we are not building everything that we need. And the work we have done and that we have shared with all the important stakeholders is that what are the barriers in the end that are preventing us to build the networks that we will need for the future. And in fact, what we have found is that there are three main areas that we need to tackle if we want to build these networks. And those are first, the supply chains, second, the permitting, and third, the financing of these networks. And if I go a bit into each one of them, today, the leading time to build practically any new infrastructure that we plan is both permitting. In a number of countries, permitting takes an important number of years in order to be able to have everything we need to start building, but also the supply chains. There are some very critical parts, components that we need for the networks, where today the lead times from manufacturers are in years, sometimes several years. There are, for instance, some subsea cables where when you try to buy one cable today, you will have it in 5-6 years time from now. This is going to be extremely important. And it's important because, in fact, in Europe, we do have world-class manufacturers. So the way to work between the TSOs, the DSOs as well, because distribution has a part in this, and the European manufacturers will be one of the key to solve this problem. Permitting, as I said before, today it's very important that we are able to find a way to simplify what it is, how it works, and financing. And financing today, we see that this 800 billions, 102 trillions, 1,200 trillions that we said before, this is going to be a huge effort, not only for TSOs, but for the countries, because in the end, this money will need to come from somewhere. The way to finance this infrastructure and the way to share the costs between all the parties that are going to benefit from the infrastructure today is not completely solved, and today it's clearly one of the hurdles that prevent to build the infrastructure that we need. But let us be clear on that, on something that for us is very important, is that you see in the challenges, we don't mention planning. Planning today works. And this is a message that it's important for us to remind, particularly in the context of the grid package today. The issue is not planning. The issue is the link between paper and infrastructure, how we go from planning to building. the network that we need. And in this regard, I would like to say a word about the grid package, because it is a very welcome initiative that addresses some of the challenges. You go to the next slide. On the fact that how do we get a grid transmission infrastructure in place? And so our main message is that we need to focus on the real barriers to deliver the infrastructure. First of all, accelerating permitting. In this, the grid package is very, very welcome. We believe that what is put in the package by the Commission addresses the real bottlenecks, creates a European framework that will be very useful by elevating the public interest status for grids in particular, in order to accelerate the permitting and to be certain that this time between planning and building will be much shortened if everything is implemented as it is there. Something that is extremely useful also on the grid package is the regional cooperation aspects that are included into that. The package proposes methodologies to facilitate the fact that states, regulators and TSOs will work better together at a regional level. Regional means a series of countries who are tackling a shared concern in order to develop and to decide on what is the best way to tackle that. But the package does not address the issues of the supply chains. We understand that there will be other legislative initiatives. This is very important. And in particular, we are clearly asking for a review of the procurement rules that will allow us to have a more partnership approach in the way we work between TSOs and manufacturers, and financing. The increase sixfold of the Connecting Europe facility will be very welcome, but it will only still be a very small part of the total financing. This is something that will need to be tackled, and it needs to go much further than what is in the package. Two very short slides on the focus on planning, on how it works and what it is proposed. You will go to the next slide. As I was saying before, today we have a framework for planning that we believe works. This is how it works today. As you go into the scenarios, in particular, I'm going to talk about the scenarios part here. We come from the EU climate targets that are developed together by all countries through the institutions. From these, member states develop the national climate targets, and this is taken into account into the planning process, where ENTSO-E jointly with ENTSO-G, which is the equivalent for gas, and NOH, that is the new one that is a carbon for hydrogen, will start by developing what we call cross-sector scenarios that are common to molecules and electrons, and that will be a translation of the political targets into something that is industrially feasible, and this is the work that we do in these cross-sector scenarios. And for this, we take into consideration to develop the future system needs, and from these future system needs, we develop the T1DP that then will be used in the interaction with the national development plans in order to have the list of projects that we will need to do. And from this, there will be a selection of what we call the project of common interest that will be done by the Commission and the member states. This is how it works today. This system is done by the TSOs working together, again, with this link between the national and European arena, and with a series of validations and approvals by the European institutions that are made to ensure that what we do is in accordance to European policy. If we go to the next slide, we will have what is in the package in this regard. And as you see, there is a big difference, because in the package, there will be a single cross-sector scenario, both electricity and gas, that will be done by the European Commission and decided by the Commission alone. And the future system needs will be done by an agency of the Commission that is called the Agency for the Cooperation of Energy Regulators that will develop this methodology also on their own. And then ENTSO-E and the TSOs, their own role will be to elaborate this T1DP only following these rules. We believe there is a risk here, again, from a system that today works, even if it can be improved. And in particular, we call it centralization, we can call it in the way we want, but this disconnection from, in particularly, the part from ACER, which is an agency that is mostly there for for improving the market rules, and don't have a mandate or a clear competency today on system of matters relating security or infrastructure. A disconnection between European and national realities, that could be an issue. Again, from us, we think that this is should not be the focus on the package. This is something that works today. There are other things to address, and this if I put it this way, power play that could arrive about who is responsible for what, could be a distraction that will not facilitate, in any case, the development of the future network. If I conclude my intervention with a final slide, for us, what's very important is to keep in mind that whatever we do, what we need is an energy transition that delivers on the European priorities. And for the work of ENTSO-E on planning, but everything else that we do, there are three key words that we try to manage together because we need to find the right balance between all three. First of all, value creation. Infrastructure is an investment, and all the money that we put in these investments should also benefit the European industry through the supply chains that we have in Europe today. We need to keep in mind that these investments need to be done in a way that takes into consideration the affordability and the keep grid costs manageable by investing for the future. And there are ways to do that, but it needs to be taken into consideration very clearly. We cannot increase the cost of the network in a way that is not sustainable, even if it's an investment. And let me be clear on that. Security is a much bigger concern today than it was 5-6 years ago. Power system resilience is a foundation of European security, and this needs to follow the discussions that we're having today in Europe around security that are much bigger than energy alone, even if energy is an important part of the European security foundation. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. And now I am open to any questions or remarks.
Merci beaucoup, Damian Cortinas, pour cette présentation.
Thank you, Damian Cortinas, for that presentation. I have two questions here. If you could possibly be relatively brief and efficient in your answer, let's say efficient, because we're a bit behind schedule already. We have a question which is about costs, more or less. The 800 billion euros required, is that about the networks or the overall system? Do you know what the network costs are going to be? No, this isn't, of course, doesn't cover the entire system. We're looking at 1.5 billion for our networks, and we're looking at all the infrastructure for all the countries that we're planning for at European level, and the national networks that will contribute as well to the interconnection setup. We have Germany alone is responsible for 100 million, and also so there's a difference here, but a gap between the overall figure that we gave you and the 800 billion for the total that we gave you. Okay, thank you. There is another question, because you were talking in general about your organization. Can you tell us a little perhaps about how the system operators, the TSOs, work between France and Germany within your structure, for example? It's a very good question. And France and Germany have been important pillars of ENTSO-E. And it's been a good story. It was entirely voluntary at the beginning, of course, and it developed there very quickly. Today, the two countries, or the TSOs from those two countries, function in such a way that we can all benefit in the big countries together from these projects, and the continent as a whole can benefit too. Of course, France and Germany, I think you're well aware in this forum, have very different systems. So the question is, how do you develop a market together? And I think TSOs have to show that the two approaches are complementary and they can work together at the heart of the European Union. Germany and France have always been very much involved in the governance of our institution as well. I come from RTE. I think I'm a good example of that. And in Germany, it's a similar situation where we have more TSOs, of course. But I think it's very important to underline that RTE and the 4 TSOs in Germany are really at the core of the work done by ENTSO-E, and they're very important. And This agreement shows us how we can work together to move forward, even if we have very different approaches to different topics. And this is a good example, I think, for Europe as a whole. And I'm delighted that this is the case and that I've been able to tell you about it today. Okay, well, thank you to you too, Mr. Damian Cortinas. You are talking, we're going to be hearing later from others on our roundtable from the sector. So we're going to move now to the third presentation, and we'll be looking now, there'll be an exchange, the exchange of electricity in Europe, the challenges, the prospects. And we have Laura Cozzi, who is responsible for developing technology and the future for the energy sector in Europe. You worked for the Italian company Eni before, and you've been running work on the sustainability of policies in energy sector and with regard to climate change. And you're also responsible in your agency for electricity, and also you're running World Energy Outlook. Thank you for joining us, and I'm going to let you speak now for 20 minutes. You have an opportunity to ask for the next chart if you want, and afterwards there will be questions which we'll be getting in the chat. You have the floor.
Madame Croiset, and thank you very much to both France and Germany and OFATE for the great pleasure of joining you today, this 20th anniversary, to talk about electrification and grids. As we can already start putting up the presentation, please. What I will do in the next 20 minutes is to give the global perspective and how does this influence Europe and the European electrification challenges and perspectives going forward, very much based on our latest analysis at the International Energy Agency, to which both France and Germany are founding members. We can go to the next slide. As the Director General Sophie Morlon mentioned, you may have heard us saying across all of our analysis that we do see that the age of electricity globally is here with us. This is based on what we are observing from data. The electricity is growing 2 to 3 times, depending on the region, faster than energy demand. And our expectation across all of our scenarios is that electricity demand globally will continue to grow even at a faster pace, and the European Union is not going to be an exception. To give a bit of a sense of how much this electricity demand is going to grow in the next decade globally, we are talking about 10,000 terawatt hours. How much is 10,000 terawatt hours? This is, imagine to put together all the electricity, in fact, consumed in Europe, in the United States, Canada, Japan, Australia, Korea put together. This basically means, if you think about it, is that over the next 10 years, the world will add the electricity system as we know it today that was developed over the past 100 years in all the advanced economies. This is very exciting. It will put forward to all of us a lot of great opportunities. It will also put some strains on the parts of the supply chains, as we have heard from ENSOE and also from the Director General Jorgensen. Electricity demand is going to grow everywhere. The drivers of growth are different depending on the regions of the world. In the United States, most of the driver is going to be attributed to artificial intelligence. In China is a combination of electric vehicles, so the electrification of transport, they are the leaders. Advanced manufacturing, they are the leaders. But there is a broader, very, very structured electrification of the economy moving ahead to keep a lead on imports of fossil fuel bills, the largest trade deficit in their economy. Europe is also going to move very, very fast with a combination of different drivers. It's going to be, on the one hand, artificial intelligence, but also electrification of transport of industrial uses. This is important, is a trend break compared to what you've seen over the past decade, where Europe electricity demand is being a bit sluggish. Now, an important point is that if we were globally to be fully aligned with reaching net zero by 2050, this demand would increase even more. This, in a way, is to say that these scenarios are a bit at the even, you can consider them as a low end in terms of electricity demand growth. How is Europe going to supply all this new electricity? Next slide, please. What you see is that very clearly low carbon technologies, wind, solar, but also nuclear, hydropower are going to be the very strong backbone of this electricity system going forward. This is very important on one hand because of the decarbonization targets, but they are equally important because they are leading the way for Europe to become more energy independent. Europe is already leading today globally in terms of clean power. It produces already 70% of a generation through low emission sources, with the record already set in last year in 2025. Imagine the rest of the world average is 40%. So leadership there. And with these trends, we are going to move towards 90% by 2035. I want to spend one word on nuclear, as we've heard already the Commission mentioning that the rest of the world, we are really seeing a resurgence of nuclear power led by new technologies, SMRs, but not only. And we are seeing a resurgence of interest within Europe, very clearly in France, but also Poland, Czech Republic, Hungary, Sweden, my own country, Italy. And very important that Europe remains in the supply chain going forward to continue diversification, affordability, and decreasing import needs. Electricity generation is, of course, very, very essential. Dispatchable generation is going to be very important because you imagine that these new sources are very flexible, very variable. So we need to manage increasingly complex and flexible and variable systems. Click please here. So what are the sources that will help us maintain reliability? And I want to stress here only 2 points. I want to stress natural gas and I want to stress battery storage. Battery storage is the area where we're seeing the most growth, a multiplication by 5 in terms of battery storage deployment across Europe. This is a global trend, but very much seen in Europe too. Very much needed to help managing hour-to-hour flexibility. Very important nowadays to manage the queues of battery storage. So how do we manage increasing amount of battery storage queues? Coming together with new AI queues, how the TSO is going to handle this is incredibly critical. I move up to this, the top to the right-hand side of the slide, where you see actually natural gas capacity. We are seeing this increasing through 2035, while actually what you see on the left-hand side is that generation is going down. And the reason is very much that we will need capacity to manage the peaks going forward. So while generation for natural gas, we are expecting it to see going down as much more strongly coal going down and coal capacity going down, we are actually seeing a need for a bit more gas generation capacity to be installed to ensure system reliability. Now, next slide, please. Very important, all electricity system in the world, we are seeing electricity demand growing very fast, but the needs for flexibility are increasing even faster than electricity demand. Increasing needs of flexibility can be short-term, terms of hours. As you can see there, the light green, increasing several times more than electricity demand, and at the same time, seasonal variability are also increasing. So as much as our electricity systems have very much been built around producing electricity, at the same time to ensure affordability, to ensure reliability, we need to think that those new electricity systems are as much and even more about flexibility than production of electricity alone. So what are the solutions? It's very, very clear that we have the short-term solution is a combination of battery, demand-side management that includes electric vehicles, and of course, hydro, pump hydro, where it's available, a lot more work needs to happen on the seasonal side of the flexibility, where we are not yet at the same level of cost reduction and in terms of availability of technology resources that are economically available to manage the seasonal flexibility. That is an important feature, especially for Europe. Here is where we are seeing hydrogen playing a role and anything that has to do with sector coupling in general, with green molecules playing an important role going forward. Next slide, please. In all of our scenarios, for the first time in 2025, we actually find, even if the word was to put the act together and get to net zero emission by 2050, is all of our scenario by the year 2030, we will pass the 1.5 degree threshold and remain above this 1.5 degree threshold for a number of years, if not decades. This has an important implication for the electricity systems, as we are actually seeing already in the data today. Last year, around 200 million households globally were affected by blackouts due to extreme weather events, being floods, being storms, being heat waves. So this means that any new infrastructure that we're building, including in Europe, because Europe has been very much affected too, needs to incorporate resilience measure to withhold the changing climate and to withhold increasingly extreme weather events. So this cost and this new resilience measure need to be embedded alongside the flexibility in any of the new investments that we're going to make in this new age of electricity that is coming very strongly for Europe. Next slide, please. At the same time, we need to fix, and this has been very well tackled by the Director General, Jul Jørgensen, by ENTSO-E. We have seen a huge amount of investment in electricity generation. This is the global numbers, but the trend is very similar if I was to show just European numbers. Electricity generation investment have grown over the past decade very, very significantly. To solar, to wind, but also other forms of generation. A click here, please. If you could click for the slide, please. What you actually see is that there has been a bit of a mismatch between how fast investment in electricity generation have grown and the investment in grids and battery storage and anything that has to do with managing the flexibility have grown. So we have grown much more fast, much more quickly on investment in generation than we have actually done on grids and batteries. This needs to be rebalanced. So all the focus on grids for us is absolutely justified, essential, and critical for the expansion of the electricity system, especially in Europe. Maybe in terms of investment, I think this is important to know. If you look at the pot of overall energy investment, less than 35% of investment 10 years ago globally were directed to electricity and electrification. Today, globally, we are already at 55%. So very clearly, the investment trend is already going in a direction of electrification globally and in Europe, but a bit of a rebalancing between generation investment and energy that has to do with the system. So being grids, being demand-side flexibility, being battery storage really needs to be ramped up much more quickly to ensure the reliability and the affordability of the system going forward. I would like to now focus on three areas that we need to think very, very carefully. The investment side is just what I mentioned now, but there are a couple of others that relate to, in particular, two things. One is materials, and the other one is skills and people that we haven't heard much yet. Next slide, please. So everything that has to do with electrification goes through copper. Copper, it's the wires, is about transmission, is about distribution, is about anything that has to do with AI. And what we are actually seeing is that currently, with the pipeline of investment that we're seeing in terms of new mines that will mine copper and deliver it to the global market by 2035, and what we are going to see is that there is going to be a global gap. So for us, this is an area of attention, an important area of attention globally, but for Europe too. What can be done and what can be done in terms of partnerships, making sure that this copper arrives on time, that arrives at reasonable prices. Looking at alternatives, we are seeing a lot of companies now moving towards new materials. Aluminium has been seen as a very critical one, but for us, this is very critically an area that requires attention going forward to make sure that the costs don't go too high, that the supply comes in a smooth way, and that the electrification plans can be executed in a timely manner. Alongside copper and other areas where we are seeing supply chains bottlenecks are, for example, transformers. Also here an area where a collaboration and putting a very high priority is very important. And the third item is actually turbines, where we have heard this already earlier on from other presentations. Any booking on especially gas turbines today is not likely to be delivered before the mid-2030s. Alongside copper, next slide, please. Another area which we at the IEA are looking very, very closely is critical minerals. For us, there is one critical name and word that you want to keep in mind to ensure energy security, and it's diversification. And when you look at the critical minerals that are needed throughout the electrification journey, being for batteries, grids and renewables, this is the first line that you see there, but also for the AI, data centers, and anything that has to do with aerospace and defense has a critical mineral element in it. And if you see, most of them are actually not only mined. This is not only about mining, as we've heard previously, but it's very much about where the refining and processing of this critical mineral is happening. Is very much concentrated, and is very much concentrated within the hands of a handful of producers, in particular one. Diversification is important across everything in energy. It includes, of course, critical minerals. And if we were to highlight here which of those critical minerals may have been already subjected to geopolitical strategic uses, it would be over half of those if we were to take, for example, just October last year. So diversification of suppliers, investment in mining, identification of new partners that can supply these critical minerals to Europe throughout the electrification journey are going to be an important element of a healthy strategy going forward. I will end with talking about people. If we look, next slide, please, at how the skills and employment has evolved throughout the energy sector in Europe over the past decade, it's very clear that the new jobs that the energy sector has brought to the European Union are very much concentrated in the electricity sector, most of them in the low carbon generation, the low emission generation, but increasingly in grids too. And we have a net increase in the number of employees in the battery supply chains, in some cases linked to electric vehicle. And we are among the countries in the world, among the regions in the world with the highest number of people working on energy efficiency. So we have provided and asked a major surveys very focused on European companies to understand where do they see bottlenecks, and if they're seeing bottlenecks, hiring for what they need for the expansion of the entire electricity supply chain from the grids to generation to end users. And there is a huge opportunity for more growth of employment in this sector, in particular related to grids. But nearly 50% of the surveyed companies actually highlighted difficulties in new hires. On the one hand, because we don't have enough either vocational training or new university degrees, a pot of new people coming online that are actually demanded in other parts of the economy, being data centers, being IT, that may be paying even more. So this for us is an area that requires attention. And the second area that requires attention is that we have an aging workforce. So we are expecting a lot of the critical workforce over the next decade, in particular in grids and in the nuclear sector, to retire. So we need to watch out to make sure that we have a good pipeline of new colleagues coming online to help to thrive in this electricity era for Europe too. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Laura Causi
Thank you
pour
very much, Laura Causi, for this presentation and for touching upon the challenges of critical raw materials and also the challenge of skilled labor. So we need to work on that also because you need people. So, first question, what type of curtailment do you see from 2025? I mean, we did not see any curtailment in 2024, and this is one of the participants who's actually asking the question.
Alors, on va chercher ça très vite parce que moi, naturellement, je n'ai pas le...
We will check that word. I think in English it is curtailment. Is it clipping? Curtailment. Curtailment.
Yeah, actually, we are. Merci. We have seen some curtailment happening in Europe in 2024. Some happening in summer period of very high production of solar during weekends, but it has been quite minimal. Going forward, we are actually expecting that some may be economic. Besides all of the electricity generation, we are actually seeing that some curtailment may be economically would make economic sense by 2035, while we continue to deploy a lot of batteries, a lot of demand side management, and a lot of grids. But I have actually shown the slide that I've shown was global. So the curtailment level that you could see there was relatively minor, but we have seen some in Europe already last year and the year before.
Alors, on a une petite coupure, petite connexion difficile avec vous, mais je pense que
technical glitch, but I do think that the overall picture is clear. Coming to the next question, the increase in demand for electricity and the data center and the role that they play there. We've already touched upon that. So to what extent do you believe that the limits of the capacity in the electricity sector also present a limit for this particular area? And what can be done?
So thank you for this question, because I think that for Europe, this is well beyond an energy sector issue, is very much a central national security issue. Currently, the United States and China are heading very strongly ahead of us. We have actually lost market share over the past 10 years in terms of data centers. And one of the reasons has actually been the difficulty of connection and the difficulty of providing the electricity that those data centers are needing. They are growing in dimension, demanding the equivalent of 200,000 households, now growing even more. We are talking new data centers being built in India, equivalent of around 1 to 5 million households. So it's really huge. In the area that is called FLAP in Europe, this is Frankfurt, London, Amsterdam, Paris, and Dublin, some of the data centers actually were not able to be connected because there has been a grid congestion issue. So absolutely, grid congestion is already an issue in some parts of the EU. There is a digital strategy that expects a tripling of digital capacity that is important for a number of economic reasons for Europe. And absolutely, we do see the electricity sector needing to follow to be able to provide the electricity needed. Those data centers can be quite movable. They decide the location. And in many cases over the past decade, what has happened is that the location has been outside of Europe. So electricity and energy is going to be very, very central for the decision of location. And in some areas of Europe, grid congestion has been already a problem.
Merci beaucoup, parce que c'est un point important à souligner qui va sûrement être
Thank you very
débattu.
much. This is a very important point that will certainly also be debated in the years following. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you also to the speakers who preceded you in this particular session. We will now break for roughly 20 minutes and then resume with a Franco-German dialogue. It's also very, very important to continue that exchange and to have that exchange with the Ministry for Economic Affairs and Energy and the French corresponding ministry, and we will continue at 11:45. We are at 11:25 more or less, so we have roughly 20 minutes for this virtual coffee break, and we will reconvene at 11:45 sharp in order to, yes, start again with our Franco-German Energy Forum. Thank you.